Mhm. Welcome. Here's the bubble of your experience floating in infinity, right here. What is it? Well, normally, if we even think to ask that question, people think they know what it is. Oh, it's me, and I'm here in this body for 50 or 80 or 30 or however many years, and I'm, going around trying to get rich and, influence people and have a lot of fun or whatever. But what is it really? That doesn't really address the issue of the fundamental issue of what's going on here. A yogi is a person who asks that question, who really wants to know. And the laboratory of their research is exactly this bubble of experience. It's sitting here. It's sitting right here. What is it? And the yogi, an artful yogi, starts from scratch or starts from, the theories of other yogis and begins to explore, well, what is this that's here? What is this bubble of experience floating in infinity? What is experience? What is infinity? What is this? How does this work? What's going on here? And the yogi looks at this and engages with it and explores it until they find an answer. Or they keep on looking. And this is what I'm about. What's going on here is very interesting. It's absolutely fascinating. And if you approach it outside the context of what it's ordinarily held to be, what consensus reality holds it to be, it's very strange and interesting. It only exists in the instant. Well, that's very interesting. It's only right here, right now. Well, that's very interesting. It doesn't seem to have any edges or boundaries or places where it stops. Well, that's really interesting. It seems to be profoundly synchronistically interconnected. Well, that's very interesting. It seems to present all these amazing experiential characteristics in all these different dimensions. And yet none of these characteristics can actually be pinned down. None of them can be found. You can't get to the bottom of what any of them actually are. And that's very interesting. So on and so forth. All of this is quite, we're all very familiar with it, of course. It's very plain to see. Probably the most interesting thing about this exploration is the discovery that what this turns out to be is so drastically and radically different than it's generally supposed to be by consensus reality. And the implications of what it is, the implications of what you are, is so drastically different. And of course, stumbling upon this actuality as it is what has been called realization or enlightenment and so on and so forth. And it reveals what one actually is, what this actually is, which turns out to be, as it happens, turns out to be so wonderfully different than it's generally held to be. Can you imagine the horror if this was really what consensus reality held it to be? The horror if this was actually what sort of the man on the street, like, oh my God, life really sucks and then you die. Nice. Why get out of bed in the morning? But fortunately, it turns out not to be like that. And because that's actually the case, it's discoverable that that's the case simply by looking for yourself, by engaging with it profoundly, and exploring it without preconceptions. Of course, there's the rub, because we've all been so thoroughly brainwashed and immersed in all the consensus reality worldviews, and so it can be very tricky to be with this freshly, to be with this nakedly, to be with this without preconceptions or without expectations. And these very subliminal preconceptions, of course, can drastically color or influence what this seems to be and the way we seem to engage with it. So generally for the yogi, that's the biggest challenge, not so much being with this as finding ways to get around one's own erroneous or shallow ways that one is holding this to be. So the challenge or the enemy for the yogi is the worldview, the consensus worldview that one holds unconsciously to one degree or another. You know, just the way things seem to be. Oh, this is a world. Oh, this is a body. Oh, this is space and time. You know, oh, time is moving from the past. I mean, all these sort of just self-evident, obvious things that if you said them to anyone on the street, they'd go, well, no, duh, of course. But, you know, all of these things are actually very questionable. Experience itself is completely beyond any way of holding it. So, in practical terms, what does one do? How does one approach this, given that we typically have this, you know, this heavy-handed construct of the way we think things are, what we think we are, what we think is going on here in the back of our minds, which is very challenging because typically we're holding it unconsciously. So it's not like we're doing it deliberately or thinking it up on purpose. We don't even know we're doing it. It's just the way things seem to be, and we just typically take it for granted that that's the case. So how to get around that fact? Well, it turns out it's actually fairly easy if you're artful, because in actual fact, the lion's share of everyone's experience is completely beyond their framework of interpretation. Most of what you experience, most of what everyone experiences, is you don't know exactly what it is. And we have, you know, to a certain degree, we do have these labels and these concepts and these worldviews that define what we're used to thinking things are. But again, you know, if you look very closely at your experience, these worldviews they're like stick figures. They're like movie sets. They're not very comprehensive. They're not really very inclusive. They don't really cover everything. In fact, they don't cover very much of experience at all. And the experiential field has the vast majority of what is actually present experientially is unknown. It's actuable, it's totally engageable, and it's completely obvious to experience, but it's unknown in the sense of knowing exactly what it is that's happening there. And because this is the case, it's relatively easy to find some area in your experience that's outside of the frame of reference. And the trick, of course, is to be with that quality of experience and let yourself see what it is. Let it show you what it is, which can happen because you consist inherently of a profound intelligence. And what is doing all this, what all of this is made of, also consists of a profound intelligence as it happens. And so you have the innate capacity to recognize what the profundity of what this is, outside of rationalization, outside of description, outside of defining what it is. You can just look at what your experience is made of. You know, here's the presence of your field of vision. What is light? Well, it's right here. You're experiencing it, but what is it? Well, you don't know what it is, do you? You can't say what light is. You know, you get the most sophisticated physicist alive on the planet now and ask them exactly what is light, and they'll say, well, we can't say. We can tell you a lot about it. We can tell you a lot about how it behaves and so on and so forth, and what it does in different measurement situations. But when you know, if you want to know what it really is, well, it's a mystery. What is sound? What is thought? What is consciousness? I mean, that's completely obvious. You know, consciousness is right here. It's completely blatantly obvious that there is consciousness. But look at what is it? I mean, it's weird. It's completely weird. It's downright bizarre. And no one knows what it is. You can't say what it is. You can't think what it is. You can formulate all sorts of elaborate theories about what it is, but they're just a bunch of concepts strung together, which doesn't engage with the experiential actuality of the fact of consciousness. So there's all of these kinds of avenues of approaching this, all these kinds of inroads of being able to be with your experience outside the context of thinking you know what it is, which immediately puts you in a context of openness, in a context of mystery, in a context of infinity, where you are with actuality that is mysterious, and yet is exactly what it is. It's real, it's actual, it's not a fantasy, and yet it's completely strange, it's completely bizarre. And coming to appreciate this strangeness is like a kind of a sensitivity training, where it's possible to learn how to be with this openness, how to be with this unresolvability, and be with the profundity of it. Because again, just because it's unresolvable doesn't mean it's not, you can't engage with it. Doesn't mean you cannot have a profound and intimate understanding of it. It's not a rational understanding. It's not an understanding like that you can describe or put into words or write a thesis about. But it's a profound understanding that can drastically shift your orientation of what you're used to defining yourself as and used to defining your life as and your circumstances, and basically just what's going on here. So I have named this the Yoga of Radiant Presence, which is just a name. But the real point is that your experience is amazing. Your experience is astounding. Your experience is intrinsically transcendental, which means it's completely beyond any kind of a human framework. And this fact is directly discoverable and directly knowable simply by investigation, of a direct experiential investigation, not a conceptual investigation or sitting and thinking about it or reading a lot of books or something like that. And doing so can be profoundly valuable and can be profoundly transformative in terms of enabling you to be with what you really are much more fully, with what is really going on here much more fully. And what you really are and what's really going on here turns out to be absolutely astounding, absolutely mind-blowingly cool. Fortunately, it just happens to be that that's the case. But again, fortunately, because that is the case, and it is discoverable, you can take advantage of this fact. And of course, this is what yogis do. They take advantage of it's like having a really good tax attorney. You get to take advantage of the fine print. You get to sort of, well, here you are in this situation. Here you are in this sucky life with all of its problems. But there's this little bit of fine print. But if you happen to look really closely and check out what's really going on, you might discover something that's really amazing that reveals something astoundingly different is actually happening. So that's a kind of an overview of what I'm about in this context. I'd be glad to discuss with you anything that occurs to you.
Yeah, the basic question of what is it, which we thought of as a koan, or just a basic existential or ontological inquiry. And over the years, I've heard it. Certain Zen traditions, they really work with that specifically as a primary question. I was revisiting a text that I have describes how to do that. It said at some point a doubt, a intuitive doubt about the status quo of one's level of experience, as you put it, will begin to occur. The solidity and ordinariness will begin to come up for question. That's really happening in my experience. And in this particular Korean Zen text I had went back and looked at last week, it describes saying you need to cultivate that doubt. That the doubt, that's actually the driving force of the inquiry. Developing or amping that up somehow. With my sense is it arises naturally in our
Right. Sure. Well, my focus, as you probably are aware, is less about focusing on a doubt or focusing on deconstructing of the status quo or deconstructing of normalcy, and more on the amazingness and astoundingness of the mysterious quality of experience that you will start to engage with when you begin to look at what it is. And that that quality is incredibly lively, it's interesting, it's fascinating, it's entertaining, it's seductive, it's fun, it's amazing. And so in that, from my point of view, and from that context, you're being drawn into it, you're letting it pull you into it rather than needing to, maintaining a doubt sounds a little bit like a kind of a rearguard action where you're kind of,
working or effortful goal.
To an extent. I mean, and again, it depends exactly what you mean by that word, because all of these descriptions refer to a kind of an energy stance, which is essentially nonverbal, and will transcend the descriptions inherently. But again, in my experience itself is so amazing. It's so incredibly amazing. And any extent to which you can stumble onto being able to access that fact, even if just occasionally or to a slight degree, that alone pulls you into it. That alone, it energizes you as well, because it's not just interesting, it's also very vitalizing, it's also exciting, it's also pregnant with implication that is immediately obvious. It's juicy. It's nourishing in ways that are, again, very nonverbal and very, transcendental.
The implication of radiance,
Yeah.
Of whatever you call it.
Yeah. I mean, I call it radiance because, and it's a technical term just to indicate what this is made of, just simply because its nature is so, experience is popping, experience is doing itself, experience is very dynamic, it's very alive, it's not inert, it's not just something that's sitting there inert like a clockwork mechanism or something, sort of ticking along. On the contrary, it's like a thermonuclear explosion or something that's just, continually leaping forth with all of this newness. I mean, you can just look at how all of your experience is entirely new every instant. And entirely unrepeated. Every instant, everything you experience, you've never experienced any of it exactly like it before. It's completely new, completely fresh, completely vital. And just feeling that, just seeing the obviousness of the fact of that is, it's incredibly, it's like a spark. It's like a spark plug or something. It's just continually firing. And, so feeling the vitality of that, which it actually is, it's not something that you need to impute to it or, philosophize about. It's self-evident that experience is intrinsically just so intensely dynamic. It's alive. It's the life force. But the life force isn't only in your body or something. The life force is, continually jumping out with all of this amazing phenomena that continually show up as experience. And so again, just sort of touching on that, feeling that vitality, that amazing actuality of that creativity, And again, these are all a bunch of words, and it sounds like a bunch of philosophy and so on. But the actuality, the experiential actuality, is really obvious once you let yourself tap into it as it is, and it's energizing.
All right, that perfect reflectivity of the mind, its ability to experience the rising stream of phenomena effortlessly.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, consciousness is absolutely transparent. Absolute clarity that all this amazing energy and patterns and profound meaningfulness and implication just continually wafts through, and just being with that nakedly is so profoundly exciting. It's so stimulating. It's so I would say I find it just so profoundly seductive that it pulls you into it. So rather than needing to I need to meditate now, or I need to do this, or I need to try to get out of my thoughts, or something like that, which is kind of, you're not focusing on this positivity, you're focusing on your muddle of confusion, which is normal and relatively dull and relatively static. So you're continually looking back into the messy closet instead of looking out into the amazing sunrise. This astounding vitality of this surprising fact of experience. And so what I recommend is more go into this positivity and let the mess take care of itself. Because as it turns out, in what this turns out to be, there's nothing that needs to be corrected. It's not like, oh, my life is a disaster and I have this horrendous, deluded and confused worldview. I have to get over here to this amazing stuff, and then I can go back and fix that other stuff. You don't even need to go back and fix anything, because it turns out that the entire construct as being a problem is completely imaginary. It's all just this amazing fresh radiance. And so this is discovered, this becomes more and more self-evident, the more clearly one sees the freshness, the vitality of this actuality, which one does spontaneously simply by engaging with it. Because it pulls you into it. It teaches you how to be with it. It's not a yoga you need to do, it's a yoga that does itself.
Last night I was talking with a person I know, a long-time Dzogchen practitioner, a student of Malcolm Noble Pushing. And she said, yeah, that's to the extent that one can have a taste of the completeness or great perfection is very good, but realistically many people can't always abide there, so the specific practices that are working with the afflictions are important.
I disagree. Because again, you're looking back, so you're just saying it's important is investing it with any credit or relevancy. It has no relevancy because it doesn't exist as such. It is actually pure transcendental radiance. This is very commonplace in Buddhist approach. It's very sort of conservative. It's very cautious. It doesn't want to really commit. The enlightenment realization is something that, the very rare person might get to after 10,000 lifetimes, but we mere mortals should stay down here and clean out the latrine, kind of thing. And, it's not that it's hard to maintain this, the radiance. It's hard to be with it. It's hard to inhabit it. You are inhabiting it. You're never doing anything other than inhabiting it. So any noticing of that is not some great achievement that you need to maintain. On the contrary, it's simply a recognition, maybe a momentary recognition of actuality. And any fantasy, any idea that it's other than that is a pure fantasy, which is completely erroneous. So it doesn't need to be addressed or corrected. Just see what's actual, and what's erroneous what's wrong see what's true, and what's not true takes care of itself. You don't need to dismantle it. You don't need to. And giving it attention is just playing a game with yourself.
Right. So it's on the level of the confinement mindset. One part of the mind trying to.
Exactly. What's going on here is completely beyond
Right.
analysis. So analyzing it as being an affliction or this or that or the other is hopelessly absurd. What it is a complete, astounding fuck. I don't know what this is. It's incredible. It's unbelievable. And in that in the context of that, where are you going to point to find a problem?
It's a blip. It's so
Yeah.
minuscule in space.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one of the major problems in spirituality is all these traditions of spirituality, most of which are essential or intrinsically inefficient and intrinsically overcautious, I would say. They're too conservative. Instead of going for the gold, they're sort of putzing around at the starting line. So you spend all your life putzing around at the starting line, jockeying for position. It's like, run the fucking race. Now get moving. Get going. Jump off the cliff.
Well, I have observed there's no ultimate consistency in any of the Buddhist traditions. Every teacher will keep teaching a particular protocol, particular method.
Oh, yeah.
It's not, within the group of Anima, Ikagyu, it's different.
Even within a school, they use the same terminology and they're wearing the same robes and the same trappings, so it seems as if it's all monolithic, but in actual fact, it's all it's all over the place. It's just scattered.
It is.
Because it's really down to the individual. It's not about tradition or about, it's about you looking at the actuality of your experience. It's down to the individual. It's not about a tradition. It's not about a teacher. It's not about anything. It's about, well, look around. Check it out. It's pretty amazing.
Especially in this room.
Well, yeah. It's a nice room to hang out in with all these gaudy colors and stuff. It's funny.
Like religion, they're all distraction.
Yeah.
Well, they're all as what?
A distraction.
Oh, right.
Well, there's simultaneously a distraction, and if you look more openly, it's a revelation of the amazing vitality of all this astounding color and form and the ingenuity of the intelligence that creates it, and so on. You can catalog it. Oh, this is a tanka of Kala Chakra, and such and such a tradition and such a puja, and so oh my God, just look at the color, look at the explosion of flame being depicted. I mean, it's just wow.
Peter, would it also be, say, archetypal energies?
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's a good way of, it's all about just getting more and more radical with what experience actually is. And very quickly, you get beyond conceptuality. Very quickly, you just get into experience itself. This is not a thought. This is not an idea. This is not something that you like, where you can have a narration and a description of what's happening. It's very, very superficial if that's happening. And if you really be with the primal, the energy of it, the fire of it, the flavor of it, very quickly you just get to the juice. Experience is unbelievably juicy. I mean, my God, this is the life force. What are you going to say about the life force? Again, it's so obvious and so potent, and it's completely irrational.
To really bring this into living practical terms, in my life, what I think of as my life, struggle with passion.
Sure.
And today I was coming back from San Francisco, and I saw being that really, you feel the power of it. I've experienced at times, not very often, but where passion transmutes into just openness
Sure.
and space.
Yeah.
You can't force that to happen.
No.
It
But
happens.
it's not even that it happens, that it transmutes. It's seeing the transmutation, which is simply seeing it from a more open angle. As long as it moves from one. Passion is the primal radiance.
Not like force, yeah.
And even when a person who's all torqued up and conflicted, and they're struggling with themselves, and they've got the urges to do this, and they're repressing it, and they're fighting with themselves, and they're all all the confusion and stuff. Every side of that tug of war is the life force. What you're struggling with, trying to repress or figure out, is the life force, and what's doing the struggling is the life force. And so it's like going like this. You're playing both sides of the game. And when you just, rather than worrying about the direction, just see the energy of it. To see that vitality, that fire. And that undercuts what it's about. That undercuts winning or losing. That undercuts transmuting it or not. It just goes, it gets more radical to just the energy of it, the life, the liveliness, the actuality of this astounding presence here that you are.
Well, they say traditionally that the yogi takes the energy of the world, like passion, and then uses that very life force to go inward or to look at it, however it's described.
But the using is not some kind of appropriation. The using is like surfing it.
Surfing.
Yeah. You're not taking it and trying to steer it or direct it. You just surf it. You just surf the energy. You just be with the craziness. You be with your own intensity. You be with just the drive, the intrinsic drive of being a human being, of being alive.
When you say surfing in the sense of being somehow aware of it, you don't give way to it, but you just a basic sense of letting it be, but the quality of mindfulness or...
No. I'm talking about you dive right into it. You drown in it. Let it drown you. Just let it carry you away. Just immerse in this vitality.
Can I ask how your body feels when you have that permeating self-force driving?
Oh, well, it's incredible, of course. I mean, we all know this.
But the feeling in your body?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you look at the field of your experience, all of it is tingling and pulsing and dynamic. There's nothing still or static anywhere in experience. It's all alive. It's all just zinging and tingling and, flashing around. And the more one lets oneself notice this, the more you tune into the fact that this is already intrinsically completely the case, the more sensitive you become to it. And you go, wow! And, the body, not just the body, but the entire world is your body, and it's all alive, and it's all pulsing, and it's all like pure electricity. It's pure fire.
Between man and woman.
Sure. Absolutely. Of course. We all know this. Of course, it's the same thing. But that's not even special. That's just a particular instance. Within any experience, there's always this fire. I mean, all experience is continually sexual. All experience is continually an intense engagement with astounding energies, with just an amazing lust of engagement, and just the sizzle and just the vibration, the intensity of it, as a passionate engagement. I mean, life, the actuality of experience is a full-on, full-body participation engagement. You're not, if you think you're sitting here with your life going, well, I think I'm sitting alive here, and I'm sitting here, and it's like, no, that's not really happening. You can pretend it's happening, but experience is coming at you at the speed of light.
Container of the vibration.
Yeah.
Of watching humanity walk and just containment.
Yeah.
Appearance.
But it's it's a pretense of a containment. Nothing is contained. How can you contain this?
I can't.
Well, no one can.
but
Yeah.
I'm just saying, when you look around your experience and like you said, the conditioning of Good condition.
Yeah, I mean, people are, we're all heavily conditioned to think we're supposed to, have a lid on things and keep things under control and be civilized and play the game and, but it's all a pretense. It's all, it's all just a really, a very fine line of pretense. No one has anything under control. Everyone is completely just, the bitch of their own energies. Everyone is a complete slave of their own, their own craziness.
So right, yeah, right.
I mean, it's pretty self-evident. That doesn't take a whole lot to see that, I don't think.
This is really interesting because the image of a classical ascetic or monk is very detached, disregarding experience, disregarding the seductiveness of experience.
No.
I'm saying there's a certain image of,
Yeah.
of an ideal yogi in some traditions.
Right. Well, this is right-hand path, though. You see,
Right,
you're getting down to the difference between
that's where I was going.
right-hand path and left-hand path, which again, in one sense, it's an arbitrary classification, but in another sense, it's completely obvious, because and this it's not just in spirituality, but it's across the board in terms of the way humans function.
Mm-hmm.
There's sort of two halves of the way to be with life. One is to sort of hold back and contain yourself and keep a lid on it and be polite and distant and figure everything out. And the other is to just go, wah! Jump into it, just let go. And this is the difference between the right hand and the left hand path. And of course, we see it in spirituality very directly. You see the crazy yogis who are, running amok and getting drunk and murdering people and, whatever, right? There's all these crazy stories. And these are illustrations of, the left-hand path. And the left-hand path is traditionally said to be more dangerous, but much, much shorter and more efficient than the right-hand path.
That would basically be tantra, isn't it?
Yeah, sure. Which means direct engagement with experiential energy, direct engagement with actuality, with the vitality of what this is, what one is, what experience actually is, without any kind of a safety net, without any kind of a caution, you can be intelligent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like you need to go out and jump in front of a semi on the highway, necessarily. You can if you want. People do, I guess. But I'm very much, as you probably gathered, a left-hand path kind of guy. So for right-hand path kind of advice, you might want to go to someone else. I'm not a play it safe kind of person.
Well, the yogi who is remaining distant and almost afraid of experience, in a way that's where you find the individualistic sense right there, because the stance of caution towards experience is almost saying...
Of course. Well, you're saying that there's something to protect from something else.
That's right.
What is there to protect?
That point is, for me, very worth...
it's a commitment to openness. It's a commitment to no self. It's a commitment to emptiness. It's a commitment to non-duality. There's nothing to protect and nothing to protect it from. Bang! Just throw the doors open. And anything that comes in will be what's inside already, and anything that goes out will be what's outside already. So where's the problem? How can that be a problem?
Because that which is wanting to protect, that itself is self.
Exactly. It creates a fantasy of danger, a fantasy of urgency, a fantasy of tighten up and hold down, a fantasy of neuroses. Whereas openness of include, reality is already open and included. The doors are going to be thrown open on your deathbed anyway.
Right.
So why beat the rush? Throw them open now. Anything anyone's protecting, what are they going to do 1 minute after they die? Who's going to be protecting what from what? So why not just, if that's the case then, why pretend something different is the case now? Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Just to get some from me.
Yeah.
Peter,
Yeah.
I'd like to hear more how you experience this through your own being.
Sure. My being is an infinitely multidimensional field of all different sorts of amazing transcendental qualities. Um, with absolute undefinability, absolute aliveness, and dynamism, um, and everything is doing itself, and it's all profoundly meaningful and intelligent, although not in any way that can be said, not in any way that makes any sense to think about, to try and describe.
So does it go into thought about that pretty quickly, or you
No. The thought is present, but thought itself is just another weird energy. I mean, what is thought? Thought's as weird as it gets. And thought pretends to be about something, but then you can't find anything that thought is actually about, and thought itself is not coherent and is spontaneous and is just another weird energy present, another dimension of this weird sizzling. I mean, it's really about being with the substance of experience rather than the supposed content of the supposed storyline. Human beings, I think, as human beings, we're very used to sort of being with our storyline of, oh, what's happening here, what am I doing here, what's going on, so and so and so and so. But all of that is very, very thin and very fabricated, and none of it is ever accurate. You can never say what's actually happening. And when you see that, but yet see this astounding richness of what is present, you can't say what it is. You can't analyze it. You can't accurately pin it down. But it's all right here. It's all real. It's all happening. So it's completely, very directly. It's a very direct experiential engagement, but it's completely irrational. It's not about analysis or narrating it or describing it or anything like that. So it's more like surfing. It's more like dancing. Experiencing is more like dancing than it is like sitting thinking about something or describing something. It's this amazing dynamic, spontaneous energy patterns just swirling around like a storm continually, right? and yet there's participation, there's sort of being with it in various ways, but you can't say what that is either. So you're just kind of in it, you're being knocked around and swirled around by it, but at the same time you're kind of surfing it, and and you can't really pin any of that down either.
Is that what you would describe substance for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not describable, really. I mean, and yet it's the substance of reality is like very bright light. It's like very bright light that shows up in all sorts of ways. It like scatters around and shows up as light, as thought, as hearing, as sound, as vibes, as flavors, as it's just all this stuff. But it's all this amazing, this light that just scatters around and flashes around. I mean, it's not literally light, but it's, that's a way of kind of indicating it.
So is that how Peter experiences it?
Sure. That's what there is to experience. I think that's how everyone experiences it. I think if one isn't aware of experiencing it that way, it's not because it's not that way, but because they're not noticing it, because they may be used to interpreting it and seeing it as being this or that. I mean, we're used to thinking, oh, this is my body, and this is the world, and these are other people, and this is, a room, and this is my vision, and then there's hearing, and then we're used to categorizing it in all these various ways. And I think, it may be that a lot of people, or most people, approach their experience that way. But if you look at your experience, it's a continual field, it's a continuum. There's no inside your body and outside your body experientially. It's a continuum, it flows. Where's thought appearing? Is it inside of anything or outside of anything? It's just where it is. It's where thought, wherever it's in the dimension of thought, whatever that is. Where's vision appearing? Is it inside of anything or outside of anything? It's just here. It's just this amazing field of vision. Where's sensation appearing? Again, it's this amazing field of tingling, all these amazing, flavors and qualities of sensation. And it's just sort of this one, it's like this, when I think the first thing I said tonight is here's the bubble of your experience floating in infinity. And if you look, it's like, well, what is here? It's like, this is the bubble of your experience, right? Does it have an inside? Does it have an outside? Just everything that's present experientially is just here, right? And we're all used to categorizing it as, oh, this is inside and this is my body and that's not me, But it's all just equally present. My hand is as present in my experience as this computer is. But I'm just, no, this is me and that's not me. This is my body, that's not my, this is inside and that's outside, But all this classification is just really sort of arbitrary and artificial. It's like when you go to sleep, where does it all go? When you go to sleep, where does the outside go? Where does the inside go? It's just here, right? And then you start dreaming, and there's new insides and outside. Where do they come from? And when you're dreaming, is there really an outside when you're dreaming? Is there really an inside? Of what? It looks as if there is, and then you wake up, and all of a sudden, likewise, there seems to be an outside and an inside, and and a self and other and all these things. But where did they come from? Because a moment ago you were asleep, none of that stuff was there. And all of a sudden, poof, it's there, But is it really there, or is it just a way of holding things?
It's also concentrated in every instance, everything that you see or aware of. Everything is concentrated in that one.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a melange of all
Yeah,
things.
exactly, yeah.
It's also at the same time particular.
Yeah, the focus is always everything, and everything is always present as a focus of experience. I mean, this is really the point: is to be, let yourself become aware, become sensitive to the way experience actually is, the way it actually flows, rather than the way we're used to classifying it and holding it. And again, it's challenging because usually we do this unconsciously. We've been doing it all our lives, and we've been brainwashed to do it and trained to do it, and our language reinforces that. So, it can be very tricky to even notice that that's happening, and to notice how much it's imaginary, how much we're doing it in our imagination. We create a body in a world. There's no world and there's no body. There's just this field of experience. And yet, if you say that to most people, they'll go, what are you talking about? I'm over here. You're over there. It's like, but, and that just feels completely self-evident when you hold things that way. But most people aren't aware that they're the ones that are holding it that way, and it isn't necessarily actually that way. It's like in a dream. You start dreaming, right, and all of a sudden you're over here, and the person you're talking to is over there. But it's a dream, so where is there? There's no space in a dream. There seems to be space, right? But there's really no space. So where did the there come from? Where did the here come from? It's just being held in imagination as being that way. And likewise here there's no space. We're holding it as being space, maybe, but you don't have to hold it as being space. It's just this weird field of experience. So it's just a matter of letting yourself feel the presence of experience the way it is, below the level of what we're thinking of it as being or holding it as being. And everyone's already doing that, so it's not a matter of even doing something new. It's more letting yourself notice that you are doing that, and that is a viable way of being with experience.
How did that transition happen?
Well, basically I went crazy. I can't really answer that question in a simple way, but my temperament has always been very what? I've always been very well, I'll be polite and say I've always been very discontented with the way things have been presented to me as being. I say, no, there's got to be more. There's got to be something else going on here. And everything that was being sold to me, I was always kind of a jerk, and wanting to find another way to do things or something. And so I thrashed around when I was a kid and did all different kinds of stuff, and just basically experimenting for myself of sort of different ways of being a person. And I stumbled into occultism and all different sorts of things and was playing around with all that stuff. And in the course of this, after a while, I had this amazing, I don't know how to describe it. I had an amazing experience where all of a sudden I just saw that, God, this really is incredibly weird. And it literally sent me nuts. I was a kid. I was in my early 20s, so I was immature and didn't really know how to handle things. So it basically threw me for a loop. I was in a mental institution for 5 weeks, when I was trying to sort all that stuff out. And then I learned to cool it a bit, and they let me out. And the rest of my life since then, I've just been being with that and settling into it deeper and deeper, I guess you could say. But it's really just a matter of, if you have the inclination to really go outside the box, to really live your life for real instead of just play the human game, then what this is plain to see. It's just a matter of, the finding your own way of letting go into that, depending upon your own, personality and temperament and so on and so forth, I guess. I mean, that's part of the challenge is we're all so unique. Everyone is so different. And everyone has completely different strengths and weaknesses and completely different talents and so on. So, you know, what you have to, everyone has to find out for themselves what they're up against, which is all basically their own nature, as well as what they have going for them, which is also all their own nature. And then you sort of do a battle with yourself in terms of the ways you intrinsically hold yourself back and the ways you intrinsically are breaking out. And and if you're fortunate, it sorts itself out in a way that gets through the war a little bit.
Peter, a lot of the time for me, which I haven't been able to articulate to this very moment, it's like I'm in other dimensions at the same time that I'm in this dimension. And,
Of course.
yeah, and part of it feels like I'm just a space cadet a lot of the time because, like, I really want to say what I really want to say, and I know what I want to say. But part of me's over in this other universe, hanging out, and
Sure.
and it doesn't seem to be a problem per se, but other than the fact that I don't know, because a lot of the time when I'm really here and I'm noticing what this is, it's like, God, I mean, I'm so spot on, and it's just such an incredible,
Sure.
magical, it's just so much fun.
Yeah.
But it just seems to be kind of confusing, and it's been most of my life, where
Sure.
I'm just able to I'm really in another place, even though I'm right
Sure.
here.
Well, you are. This is endlessly confusing. This does not make any sense. It doesn't come together.
Yeah.
It infinitely splits apart. There's dimensions and dimensions and dimensions and dimensions, and everyone is in all of them.
But see, people are trying to talk to me while I'm on. People are like, "Where did she go?"
Well, but that's their problem.
Yeah, well, yeah, sort of, kind of. Yeah, it's both. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
No, but you have the functionality that you have. You have the ability to be responsive and to, put on clothes before you go outside the house and stuff like that.
Barely,
But that's okay. Well, some people don't at all, and you happen to, and that's kind of nice to have in your repertoire. It's convenient.
Yeah, it is. It's kind of
But whether or not you have that, the main thing is to have an awareness of this multidimensionality is huge, because you're participating in what you really are. You're participating in what this really is, most of which is not engageable in human terms.
Oh, it's super fun, actually.
It's totally fun.
I mean, like, I've somehow maneuvered.
Yeah.
This.
But the trick, don't, I recommend don't let yourself think that you're supposed to be more functional than you are. You're supposed to not.
Yeah, that's where I get hung up.
Because that's just more consensus reality, conformism bullshit. You're very fortunate to have that awareness, to know that you are all these places. It's very, very cool that you have the conscious awareness that everyone is actually like that, but most people suppress it and push it down to the unconscious, so that it's basically just denial. It's like hypnotizing yourself that you're not experiencing what you're experiencing. And so you're here front and center. No wonder it seems dull and lifeless and boring. Because people who do that are cutting off all this amazing shit that's going on, just in this astounding, just trips that are just flashing through all these dimensions of experience. But tuning into that is tuning into to the astoundingness of the life force, the astoundingness of the multidimensionality that you actually are. So it's great. And the other side of it is you can't be different anyway. You can't be more functional than you are anyway. I mean, even if you try to be really repressive and be, no, you know what I mean? You say, okay, I'm gonna just be right here and pay attention and yeah. But even if you do that, it's not it's gonna work.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, so because that's part of your karma. I mean, part of everyone's karma. Everyone has let's call it the talents in the ways that you have them. And some people are very verbal and focused and can talk bullshit 7 ways from Sunday, and other people are like, ah, and that's just how it is. You can't, you're not going to change that. And yet even that evolves and changes and morphs around, and that's cool. But it's not like, anyone can control anything. But
well, I mean, they kicked me out of school or like put me in this special place over there.
yeah. But
Something like that.
but that's their problem, not your problem.
I'm so glad. Actually, no.
Yeah, exactly.
In hindsight.
No, exactly. Exactly. You're very fortunate.
Yeah, exactly. And now they have special schools for kids like me.
So you're special.
Special buses. And
Yes.
It's a crowded room.
Yes, very.
But everyone's like that. Not everyone lets themselves be actively aware they're like that. And none of that has to do with their functionality or not.
Right.
You can be totally dysfunctional and still be totally boring.
Right.
Or you can be totally functional and be completely spaced out. And it has nothing to do with the spacing out or not. It's more just you're functional if you're functional, just because that's who you happen to be. You've got a functional, alignment in your chart when you were born or whatever, right? I mean, it's really part of the challenge, not just in spirituality, just in being a human, because people are so radically, fundamentally different. And there's the fantasy, well, we're all kind of basically the same, and it's bullshit. It's complete bullshit. Everyone's a one-off. Everyone is, just apples and oranges completely with regard to everyone else. And you'll find a lot of people are kind of a little bit more like it's kind of a pseudo-average thing, but then a lot of people aren't even remotely. And even people that are like an average kind of thing in a lot of ways, they'll have some way that they're just, woo, because everyone is just so different. And so you can't generalize, do this because advice to one person is, good advice for one person is absolutely the worst advice for another because they're in a different place. So the trick is, it's always, how to be you is always a personal challenge for the individual. And you have to find your way through it by feeling your way into your strengths and feeling your way into your weaknesses and finding ways just to make it all work. Finding ways to be with it that clicks.
Well, and it's kind of like the more you just notice,
Yeah.
instead of trying to make it work, it just works.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, it just works.
Yeah, the more you let go, the more it optimizes.
Yeah. Just kind of
Optimum. You always find your optimum functionality the more you let go, i.e., just let yourself be let it be what it is. Let yourself be what you are. The more you try and control things or juggle things or steer things, the more you muck it up.
The notion of functionality is really just an idea because everyone is functional.
Yeah, but just in different ways. There's so many different kinds of functionality.
Yeah.
And consensus reality says no, functional is being well turned out and looking good and speaking well or behaving this way or behaving that way. But there's other kinds of functionality that are just totally not acknowledged, in popular society and so on.
That, it seems to me. I mean, function is function, and the sun rises, the sun sets, and even the people we see on the street here in SanRafael, who by most standards, they don't have a 9 to 5, they don't get a paycheck, they don't have, they're wandering around, but they're functioning, they're breathing, they manage to eat, they manage to sleep, they manage to walk around, they manage to make it from day to day, in whatever fashion they do it. That's function.
Sure.
It's like expecting,
Absolutely.
every rose bush to look the same, or every seed that lands in a multitude
Sure.
of places to all develop the same way.
Sure.
They function as they function.
Sure.
Like you said, it's a one-off.
Yeah.
So function is always function. So there's no possibility of dysfunction.
Well put.
Thank you so much. Just had to get that out. I was talking about that with Peter recently, and then with a friend who I was visiting, walking with, and we were, I don't know if any of you have ever been to Albany Falls at the end of beyond the racetrack in Albany. And there's a whole community of.
I'm not going to be able to function. But on the contrary, once you get through that and go deeper and let go into this and open to it, as you say, you discover, in actuality, if anything, your functionality increases because you become comfortable with improvisation. You become comfortable with just sort of being spontaneous. You become comfortable with all these sort of multi-dimensional kinds of engagement without needing to be linear and controlled and have things planned and, what am I going to say and all this kind of stuff. You just kind of wing it, let go, and lo and behold, that turns out to actually be a good, a big plus, a big gain. Because again, what we are and what this is intrinsically an inconceivable profound intelligence. Just look at the intricacy of your body and the intricacy of all this astounding functionality of laws of physics and stuff. I mean, God, what's doing that is inconceivably, detailed and structured and organized and interconnected with itself. And you are that, of course. It's doing you, it's doing your body, it's what you are. And again, this becomes more and more obvious when we open to this, as we settle into this. It's like, oh my God, this is incredible functionality, this incredible intelligence that is right here, and that, does everything. It's always been doing everything anyway.
Or is it sort of like you, I hate to use this phrase, because I kind of become one with, become less apart.
Well, you discover you are it.
You are it.
And so it just becomes, all of these apparent separations and I'm me and life is out there somewhere. All of that stuff is seem to be just absurd. Life is crazy. Reality is crazy. Reality is nuts. Reality is just a complete chaos, and yet it's an incredibly brilliant, incredibly meaningful, profound, vital chaos. And so, so again, at first, when you look at that, you say, "Oh, wait a minute! What am I getting myself in for here? This is pretty weird, Maybe I should keep my training wheels on." But then again, when you get to when you sort of cross over and let go into it, then you get, wow, it's a real gain, it's a real win, because this life is incredibly powerful, it's incredibly functional, it's incredibly, it's so deep. It has, literally infinite resources to bring to bear on everything. And there you go.
I had a couple of weird experiences like that this week too. I was working on a body. I work on bodies, and it was the weirdest experience. I had no. I was working on my own body.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it wasn't like a thinking thought. It was my body was there, and I had all the feeling of my body on the table, but I was working. It was a very unusual experience.
Mm-hmm.
It was really, there was no, I was both places.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't like, I'm there, I'm here. It was a real integral experience. And I had some other experiences a couple times driving where it was almost like everything was almost like a big squishy ball, and everything was just in that squishy ball, And so I didn't have any sense of like driving the road and me driving and things here. And I just had to let the driving happen, I guess you could say. Rather than being able to really force or focus on where I was going or how I was going.
Yeah.
It was an unusual experience. And then I had another experience too where I just felt I was happy to be who I was. I mean, it was like a different experience I'd ever had, that I didn't want to be anything else or anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very, very unusual experience. There was no... there was nowhere to go. There was no one else I wanted to be. Nothing else I wanted to be. Or but it was not just a mental thing. It was a
Right.
very different experience. It wasn't just, oh, I'm blissed, I'm peaceful, it wasn't that. It was a very different experience. All those things were very different.
Yeah, again, what this is, what this, turns out to be and to have always been, is so radically different than what we're used to thinking it is, all our life when we're thinking of ourselves as a person and thinking of ourselves as separate and all this stuff. And as we, again, we're on. It's broadcast.
No, it says it just went off.
Well, not on my end. Anyway, and as we, as we sort of mature, as we let go, as we incorporate this actuality more and more deeply, as spontaneously happens, all these different perspectives begin to reveal themselves, and we get these little flashes of, oh, I'm everything, and yet exactly all me and all my quirkiness and all my nature is an amazing art form of, it's a very specialized sort of a production to be exactly that, and all these kinds of things. I resonate very much with everything you say. And again, all of these, because what this actually is so drastically and profoundly and wonderfully more and different than, human ideas of what it is. When you discover you are a transcendental consciousness energy field, you're not a human being. You don't live in space and time. You're just, you can't say what it is, but it's mind-blowingly incredible, and it really is that. It just, this isn't like an aspiration or, something to want. It's like, oh my God, it's really, wow, it happens to be that. How cool, how amazing. And again, this, as we open to this, as we settle into this, it just keeps continually, forever revealing facets of itself, these little facets and snippets of how amazing this is.
It has gone off. I just heard from Jeff.
Okay, well, it's broadcasting on my end, so I can stop it and then restart.
Yeah.
Sorry for the digression. Yeah.
I've just been noticing this process of like the unconscious and the conscious sort of like blending.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of freaky sometimes.
Oh, for sure.
Sometimes in the middle of the night I wake up like, wow, this is really freaky.
Oh, yeah.
These are places I don't really want to go. No wonder.
Oh, yeah.
No wonder I thought up the unconscious just to keep them down.
Yeah.
It's really odd.
For sure.
And then another odd thing I notice is, like you said, that it's good to sort of take a stand on what you know.
Yeah.
So I was watching, I just got some new cable, and I was watching TV a lot, and I thought, I would rather work on my Sanskrit, even though I know that TV watching and Sanskrit chanting are the same. You know what I mean?
Sure.
And I didn't want to like get off into my own Sanskrit world. I didn't want to juice that up anymore because I knew it wasn't the truth. The truth is like it's the same. Watching it's all the same.
Yeah.
But I still like to do that.
Well,
I still think I like to do
sure.
that. It's really strange.
Yeah, but just because it's all the same doesn't mean you need to just sit and stare at your navel either. If it's all the same, then being obsessive about something is just as good as not.
Right. Yeah.
So again, don't use the argument that it's all the same in order to somehow try and squash yourself or try and squash your own energies, because the energy of your obsessiveness, the energy of the things you're drawn to, is part of is the mystery. Is part of the the strangeness of what this is, and that's the very the energy of engagement with the ongoing unfoldment.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So your engagement with unfoldment is to do what you're drawn to do.
Yeah.
That's the processing of the yoga.
Yeah.
It's not a matter of being, I should hold myself detached, or I should hold myself neutral, or it's like, no, just like, bang, have at it. if you're drawn to something, then dive right in.
Yeah, well, I was reading part of your book in the middle of the night. That always sort of gets me lined up a little bit better.
A word from our sponsors.
Yeah, really. And I started underlining things. I almost underlined the whole book. I mean, it's terrible. It's like, I have to stop this, maybe. But one of the things I read last night was that what you are drawn to do, what you have a compulsion to do, so to speak, is your art form. It's your artful expression of
Sure.
who you are.
Yeah. And it's your process at that point in time.
Right.
So whatever it's not like you're supposed to hold yourself neutral or hold yourself plain vanilla or sort of, just like, no, dive right in, let yourself be carried away, be real passionate, and just go into what you're drawn to. And that, the more efficiently, the more thoroughly you let go into that, the more efficiently that becomes your process that moves you through through your yoga, that moves you through, into the next phase, so to speak.
Right. Yeah. 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 Because I mean, just if I say to myself, well, the truth is, I kind of I see what the truth is on a sort of a deep understanding level, but I see also I'm completely crazy on some other level, some other level.
Which is totally not a problem. That your process is being crazy, in whatever levels you're crazy in. There's nothing wrong with being crazy. Being crazy is, what we got.
Yeah. But it's not for. I mean, this stuff about blending the unconscious and the conscious is not for the faint of heart. I can just say that.
No, it can get hairy for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it can be like.
It's real.
Yeah.
But again, you don't need to push it or do it or make sense of it. It does itself.
Yeah, right. A lot of the stuff that's come up lately is like sort of thoughts about death, thoughts about my own death, thoughts about things like that. I mean, these things are sort of kept down, and then all of a sudden it popped up again, like, hey, I don't really want to die. On the other hand, give a shit. I mean, it's so strange how these things all sort of start to integrate.
Yeah.
Clarity, it's like, those kind of like.
Yeah, you find yourself really on different sides of it.
Yeah.
Or older kind of ideas, ideas, older fears.
But nothing ever comes together, Things don't ever get coherent or come together or line up into agreement or stuff, or let's say very rarely. and not for very long.
Right.
I mean, this is chaos. This is reality is entirely intrinsically unresolvable.
That's really.
And so there's all of these characteristics, and it's not like they're coming together or we're supposed to put them together or they're somehow going to. No, things don't come together. They're just everything. It's like look at the galaxy. Just all these weird stars and shit just flying around all sorts of weird directions, and sometimes they crash into each other. It's not like they're moving together and going to form some wonderful little pattern and all fit together. No, it's just a bunch of. It's a mess. It's chaos. It's crazy. Right. And yet that's the pattern. That's the pattern of the radiance. That's the embodiment of this astounding inconceivableness.
Right.
Far from being a problem, it's the very sacrament of its nature. Is its open-endedness, its unresolvability, its tendency not to converge. It doesn't tend to converge on itself. On the contrary, it endlessly diverges.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, so that idea of blending the conscious and the unconscious is not like they blend into one.
No.
It's just like more chaos.
Yeah, you just get the idea of conscious and unconscious is too pretty. It's weirder and sloppier than that.
Yeah.
And then in that case, conscious and unconscious are just woo. They're just like scratch that off. Another bad theory.
Peter, how much of what one would interpret as one's own subconscious or unconscious, one's own, say, dormant samskaras, influences experience? How much of it is collective? It's like the thought forms that are out in the ether.
None of it is collective in any simple sense. It's all you. You alone exist, but not you as an entity, but you as a universe, you as a continuum. So you are the ground, and you are the complete ground, and all tendencies, all energies, all samskaras exist within the ground and emerge to the extent that they do and have their dance. And all of that never departs from the ground, and all of that is just the nature of reality, and that's what you are. And so there's no you and others, there's no you and then some collective. You are the collective. You and the ground are a continuum the same way that Hawaii and the earth is a continuum. You say, oh, Hawaii's an island, it's just here and it has a boundary around it, but it doesn't. If you follow Hawaii down, it's connected to the whole earth. Hawaii is connected to California, it's connected to New York, it's connected to the North Pole, because they're all one thing. Just Hawaii is a particular bump that's sticking up. And so likewise, anything you're used to classifying as you personally is just like an island, it's like a bump that's sticking up, that's an arbitrary, demarcation of the ground, which is absolute continuum. And there's no actual separation between this bump and the ground. The ground is just bumpy, and you're the bump.
Well, I think of it as sort of a database, a memory storage, a storehouse. Consciousness is a classical term. Something that carries experience, something that registers at every...
Yeah, but it's not like there's experience and something that's carrying it. There's no parts or compartments. It's all one thing. The ground is the experience. The ground is the samskaras. The presence is the radiance, and the radiance doesn't depart from the presence.
So the ground as a repository of action, of the imprints of actions, like.
It's the repository of actions. It's the substance of actions, and it's the space within. It's a virtual space within which actions seem to take place, and actions don't ever depart from the ground. A good model might be a dreaming consciousness. So all these dreams are generated by the nature of the consciousness, and they appear within the consciousness as a relatively apparently separated and elaborated display. But in actual fact, the dream never departs from the consciousness. It's not like the consciousness is over here and the dream's over there. They're one and the same. It's the nature of the consciousness to project to itself as these apparent projections without anything actually being projected. So the ground never departs from itself. The radiant presence never departs from itself. And yet, it looks like all this.
All those types of traditional ways of thinking of it are sort of symbolic or
they're all predicated on having qualities that are actually differentiable from each other.
right.
Where you can say there's this and there's that, and this has a relationship to that, and that has a relationship to this. And in reality, nothing like that exists whatsoever.
Even the skandhas, aggregates of mind, body.
There are assertions about something which is not actually like that. There are assertions about aspects of the way one transcendental condition can seem to be. There's only one condition. This is here is one thing. What you are is one thing, and it's entirely transcendental. Right here, right now, that's already the case. Intrinsically, it can't not be the case. And all these philosophies and human descriptions, talk about this versus that, and the relationships and the mechanisms, but it's all fantasy. It's like in a dream, talking about what's been happening in the dream. Well, I'm here and I was over there, and then this happened, and this came to me, and then I left it and went over there. As if all these things were actually separate. But there's nothing present. None of these things are actually there. It's just a dream. And the dream isn't even actually there. It's just consciousness. So it looks as if it's describable as if that's the case, but it's totally inaccurate, and it has a completely inaccurate implication.
the Abhidharma that you're familiar with, that's the Buddhist
Sure.
psychology, that describes in great detail the 51 mental factors.
Yeah.
And obviously it's pointing to
I'm the mom.
Part of the chaos.
Oh, no, we're not using it.
Always, always, always.
Really, well, it's pretty good, because you and I stayed off the Wi-Fi, we're just gonna. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Well, anyway, it's just about quitting time, so thank you all for coming. It's a pleasure to talk with you, and I hope you have a great time. Enjoy life, it's crazy. And that's a good thing.
Thank you. It fits.